In the 5th year of our marriage, I did something foolish. I sent Jonathan's favorite canary abroad, hoping he would change his mind. However, when he found out, he said nothing. It instantly threw my family into turmoil, forcing my dad to kneel and my mom to turn gray overnight. Now he stands in front of me with a worried frown, as if he wants to do something to me. Emily, it's really because I was too lenient with you, which made you go too far. Now it's your turn to experience the pain of living worse than death. After Jonathan said this, I finally lifted my head and glanced at him. We were in love for 4 years and married for 5. We once spent the most beautiful youth together. Who would have thought it would come to this now? I gently stroked my belly. I am almost 3 months pregnant. Yet Jonathan acted as if he didn't see me, his face dark as he asked, "I'll give you one last chance. Where is she?" I wanted to sneer, but my reckless behavior had already affected my family's future. "If you let my parents go, I'll tell you." Jonathan nodded, slowly approached me, and seized my neck unexpectedly, forcing me to look up at him. "Emily, don't go too far. Finding Sophia's whereabouts is just a matter of time. What qualifications do you have to negotiate with me?" I felt a strong wave of discomfort, wanting to vomit, my face flushed, and my veins felt like they were about to burst. I clenched my teeth, a surge of fear and despair washed over me, sending chills down my spine. Despite that, I shouted with all my might, "Can you really make my dad kneel for you? He's my dad!" Jonathan held me expressionlessly. His strength was surprisingly overwhelming. I couldn't help but cry, my gaze fixed on Jonathan's eyes. They held darkness and wildness. I believe he would turn violent with me because of another woman. Just when I was about to suffocate, Jonathan released his grip. I gasped heavily, feeling a wave of fear, curled up on the sofa. In almost an instant, memories from the past flooded into my mind. I suddenly couldn't help but burst into tears, for the past that can never be returned to, for this despairing marriage. More so, I feel heartbroken for my current self. Jonathan stood coldly in front of me, showing no reaction at all. He didn't even give me a chance to catch my breath, grabbing my chin again and seriously asking me, for the last time, "Where did you send my Sophia?" Then, he left. After receiving my message, he immediately ran out of the room. I clearly saw that relieved, happy expression on his face. My husband is already infatuated with another woman. I wiped my tears and quickly contacted my parents, preparing to move out overnight. I thought my father would blame me, but he just comforted me, his voice slightly choked, saying that our Emily has suffered, and Dad doesn't blame you, we just need to leave. After hanging up the phone, I felt deep guilt and despair. Jonathan and I dated in college and got married after graduation. Jonathan's family is very wealthy. Having a good relationship with them was something my dad never dared to imagine. Jonathan was also worried that I might suffer grievances. My family has no backing, and no one can help me. At that time, I firmly told my father that Jonathan loved me so much that he would never let me suffer. He would prepare gifts for me on every holiday and generously take me to meet various friends. Every day apart, I couldn't stop thinking about you. Just seeing someone look at you made me feel uncomfortable, even angry to the point of my eyes turning red. He told me, "Emily, do you know? The people in the Jonathan family have quite strange personalities, but you are the only one who made me understand what love is." Jonathan always lacked a sense of security and constantly needed me to reaffirm my feelings for him. I could only hold him tightly, feeling heartbroken, until he quietly fell asleep in my arms. I once thought we would be like this until old age, so when he suddenly became indifferent, I immediately panicked. Sophia is a recent college graduate. The first time I heard her name was through Jonathan's secretary. The secretary mentioned that today's young girls are really uncreative. The scene of spilling coffee on the president has been outdated for ages. I took it as a joke and didn't pay much attention. Not long after, Sophia unexpectedly became Jonathan's exclusive secretary. He would take Sophia horseback riding, and although she wasn't very skilled, Jonathan would hold her in his arms as they strolled leisurely on the horse. Sophia doesn't understand the complex relationships in business. Jonathan patiently taught her, even personally demonstrating how to brew tea. Some insensitive partners made jokes at Sophia's expense. The usually calm Jonathan immediately sent that person to the hospital. Jonathan didn't seem to intend to hide anything. His kindness towards Sophia is something everyone knows. By the time I heard about these things, they had already appeared hand in hand at many parties, kissing amidst everyone's teasing. I looked at the photos sent by others and felt angry with Jonathan for the first time. Jonathan sat silently in the boss's chair, watching me with a look that seemed to say I was being unreasonable. Emily, you're almost 30. What are you arguing with a young girl about? When you were in your 20s, I cared for you like this, didn't I? At that moment, I felt shocked. I realized that Jonathan's love is very devoted. He only likes younger women, and I am no longer young. I originally planned to get a divorce, but unexpectedly found out that I was pregnant. I want to fight for my child and family one more time, so I had my father find someone to send Sophia abroad. The outcome is predictable. After 9 years of relationship, I turned out to be nothing in Jonathan's eyes. I lost terribly. My father asked me to give him 3 days to think it over. Since we have already offended the Jonathan family, there is no place for us here. I took this opportunity to schedule an abortion for that day. Since the relationship is over, there's no need to keep Jonathan's child. Anyway, he has many young girls to have children with. The doctor said my gestational sac was too large and needed to be handled with an induction procedure, and I'd have to be hospitalized. But I can only stay in this city for 3 days, so I had no choice but to put this matter on hold for now. On the way back, I consulted a lawyer about the divorce. I heard that everyone started to back down when it came to handling Jonathan's case. Emily, Jonathan's company has a professional legal team, and we might not be able to get involved in this matter. I understand this, so I did not make it difficult for him. After marrying Jonathan, I became a full-time housewife. He said he didn't want me to be seen outside, so I obediently spent 5 years like that. Now my social circle is all Jonathan's people, and it's quite difficult to find someone to help. It's okay, once he brings Sophia back, the divorce shouldn't be complicated, right? I roughly checked the things at home. I didn't think about taking any valuables, just picked some seasonal clothes and identification. Since I got pregnant, I've always felt very tired. While organizing late into the night, I ended up falling asleep on the sofa. The next day, someone suddenly opened my front door from the outside. I was so scared that I immediately sat up, and to my surprise, Jonathan had returned. He was holding a little girl by the hand, and her name is Sophia. She is particularly beautiful. The photo probably only shows half of her beauty. Sophia was carrying several luxury brand shopping bags, and the sparkling diamonds on her high heels almost blinded me. It seems things have been handled quite well. I felt a tightening in my chest. I didn't expect Jonathan to come back so soon. I couldn't help but touch my neck. The feeling of suffocation in my neck returned, and I couldn't help but feel a bit scared of Jonathan. I swallowed hard and couldn't help but stand up from the sofa. Jonathan brought Sophia in front of me, smiling as he fixed her hair, then turned to me with a calm expression. Emily, apologized to Sophia. I could hardly believe my ears. Even though we had already fallen out, he had made a mess of my home and even tried to hurt me yesterday. I thought that was crazy enough. Now I'm supposed to apologize to his mistress? Seeing me in a daze, Jonathan directly grabbed my chin and turned my face toward Sophia. Didn't you hear me clearly? I said to apologize to Sophia. Jonathan is a businessman. He knows exactly how to hurt someone's feelings, even when facing his wife, with whom he has had a long relationship. Sophia hadn't looked at me since she entered the room. She lowered her head, her lips slightly pressed, looking very wronged and particularly heartbreaking. I said, Jonathan, there's no need for this. My identity was already not very honorable, so it was understandable that this sister hated me. Even as I said this, I clearly saw Sophia subtly roll her eyes, giving me a wary glance. Seeing that I didn't say anything, Sophia started tugging at Jonathan's sleeve again. Jonathan, I'm a bit tired and want to rest for a while. Jonathan kissed Sophia on the cheek and gently said, All right, you go rest in the room first. Sophia widened her eyes and looked at me, asking suspiciously, This is your home, where am I supposed to rest? Jonathan generously took her to our bedroom. The implication was clear. I trembled all over, gritting my teeth to keep from cursing. I tried to calm myself down, watching Jonathan safely escort her into the room, silently telling him, Jonathan, let's get a divorce. You completely disregard my dignity, and the business my parents worked hard to build has been ruined by you. I held back my grievances and said with a trembling voice, This is all my fault. It was my failure to see clearly from the beginning. Upon hearing this, Jonathan slightly raised his eyebrows. He stood in front of me with his hands in his pockets, looking very handsome, leaning in close with a somewhat strange expression. It was even somewhat difficult to decipher Who said I want to divorce you? As long as you behave a little and don't do anything excessive, you are still my wife, still the wealthy lady of the Jonathan family. I stared at him in surprise, thinking, what do you take me for? Unexpectedly, Jonathan stood up, waved his hand dismissively, and said, stop playing these tricks. Wasn't it because you were attracted to my identity in the Jonathan family that you were willing to date and marry me? Emily, after marrying me, you know how much your father's business has improved, and now you're getting into divorce issues. I stood there, my mind blank. Jonathan didn't say much, just loosened his tie and walked back to Sophia's master bedroom. The recent events have just been too overwhelming for me. When I learned that Jonathan thought so little of my feelings for him, I felt both shocked and amused. At that moment, Sophia peeked out of the master bedroom, wearing a bathrobe, her hair down, and a rosy complexion on her face. Hey sister, I'm a bit hungry. Jonathan said the food you make is especially delicious. She smiled beautifully. After being a housewife for so many years, she must know how to cook many tasty dishes. Could you please go out and buy some groceries and come back later? As soon as Sophia finished speaking, she was pulled away, and the door slammed shut. I didn't say anything, just took off my wedding ring and threw it into the trash can. After taking one last look at this ironic place, I realized that letting go could be so simple. Before hearing the uncomfortable sound, I chose to turn and leave. It doesn't take much effort to make me walk away. I really don't want to stay in a place like this for even a second. On the way to my parents' place, I couldn't help but hold my forehead. What Jonathan said kept replaying in my mind, making me feel very upset. For 4 years in college, I never knew his true identity. His attire was very simple, so I had no reservations when I was dating him. Plus, my dad's company does well, so my living standards are considered quite good among ordinary people. After we started dating, Jonathan talked to me about his difficult childhood, feeling a lack of love and care. I really felt sorry for him and wanted to give him more love. I spent all my pocket money on Jonathan, wanting to make him happy, and every time he gave me a gift, I would reciprocate double. After the two of them started living together, she began to seriously learn how to cook, wanting him to taste the flavors of home. It wasn't until Jonathan proposed to me, involving both families, that I realized Jonathan had such a large family. After getting married, even if my dad doesn't bring it up as a topic, others will still consider my dad's reputation in business. In recent years, my family has had to rely on Jonathan's family. I'm a bit confused. It turns out Jonathan has always viewed me this way. The tears suddenly flowed down, as if my heart had been pierced with a big hole. Jonathan is right. The people in Jonathan's family have very strange personalities. And he is even more so, cold and aloof, perhaps watching me for these past few years to see how I perform. He has never believed in my love for him, even doubting that my feelings might just be an act. I find this quite ridiculous. I didn't expect it would take me 9 years to see through all of this. After returning home, my parents had everything prepared. My dad said these 3 days are just meant to give me some time to relax. Now we have no worries. We've already bought tickets for that evening, heading straight abroad. Before getting on the plane, Jonathan called me. I expressionlessly broke my SIM card in half and threw it directly into the trash can. After the two of them got close, she'd probably remembered why I hadn't returned yet. On the plane, my mother held my hand. I saw her, once well-dressed, now looking disheveled and lost, her hair already turning gray, and her eyes slightly swollen. All these changes are brought about by me, the disobedient daughter. I instinctively wanted to say I'm sorry, but my mother shook her head. She, who rarely cried, now shed tears at just the sight of me. Everything happened so suddenly. We are all going through these tremendous changes. Mom, where are we going? My mother said that although Dad went bankrupt, he still has some connections. He has an old friend who heard about our situation and invited our whole family over. My mother patted my hand and said, "Don't worry, you should relax a bit." I understood my mother's meaning and could only shake my head. Jonathan isn't willing to divorce me, so let's separate for a while. Once the situation stabilizes, I will file for divorce. Things have made some progress for now. My family and I can only face it together, and we'll take it step by step from here. We got off the plane, and my father's old war buddy and his family came to pick us up. His last name is Anderson, he has a loud voice, and he introduced us to his foreign wife. My son originally planned to come, but something came up at the last minute and he won't be back for a while. My father just gently patted Uncle Anderson on the shoulder. The feelings of the older generation don't need much explanation. Uncle Anderson arranged for us to stay in his vacant villa, which had everything we needed, so we didn't have to worry about anything. After seeing off the others, our family started to sort out our luggage, and we were busy until it got dark. I was so tired that I could barely stand up, and it was then that I suddenly remembered there was still something I hadn't taken care of. We rested in our new home for 2 days, and my father went to see Uncle Anderson as agreed to see if there were any suitable jobs available. Even my mother, after adjusting her mood, found some part-time work she could do. Jonathan has a lot of power, and his slightest idea could put our family in trouble. My father felt very sorry for those innocent employees who lost their jobs. Everyone received quite a bit of compensation. Now we don't have much money left. It's barely enough to last us for a while. I forced myself to pull it together, knowing there was no time to regret, so I made an appointment at a small hospital for an abortion. After experiencing so many changes, I'm glad my family is still here, giving me a chance to start over. A month later, my body had recovered, and I started looking for a job. Unfortunately, I graduated several years ago and have no work experience. Even though I speak the language fluently, my age makes it hard for others to offer me a good position. It's okay, I told myself. How could a healthy person be hungry? I didn't tell my family and found a high-paying kitchen job. The boss is very nice, letting me sort out the kitchen garbage, and if I wanted, I could also wash some dishes. I thought there was nothing wrong with that and happily accepted. This is my first job in life. Washing the dishes until they are sparkling clean feels really good. Time flies. It's already been 3 months. My hands have been soaked in disinfectant, and even though I wear gloves, there are still some cracks and blisters on each finger. It was a weekend, and the restaurant was very busy with customers. I carried a heavy bag of garbage, struggling to walk to the trash can. The trash is really heavy. It took me several tries to finally throw it in. I feel so exhausted that I could barely move, so I squatted down, took off my mask, and let my nose breathe some fresh air. Just as I was about to head back to the kitchen to keep working, I suddenly saw a pair of shiny leather shoes appear in front of me. Then, a cold voice rang out above me, "Emily, have you had enough fun?" I didn't dare to look up, feeling frozen in place, as blood rushed to my head, sending a shiver down my spine. Seeing that I was frozen, Jonathan's face showed a good-natured expression as he reached out a hand. "Get up! Come back with me." I swallowed hard, trying to calm myself down, and then put my mask back on. There are still many things to do in the kitchen. I don't have time to waste with unworthy people. Just as I was about to leave, Jonathan suddenly grabbed my wrist and turned me back, catching me off guard. My hand was pale and swollen from soaking, and Jonathan couldn't help but glance over, frowning. "What are you doing? The rich lady isn't home, and you're here washing dishes in a foreign country?" I stared at Jonathan's face. I find that I still can't let go, and I have such strong resentment. Everything that's happening now is because of this person. I tried hard to pull my hand back, wanting to slap him, but Jonathan easily dodged. He directly pulled me towards his car, and I struggled desperately, trying to kick his leg. I kicked Jonathan, and he slightly lost his balance. In the end, he was still very angry, forcefully shoved me into the car, and told the driver to drive. I didn't know where he wanted to take me, and I didn't really care. I knew that if Jonathan truly wanted to find me, he could locate me and my parents no matter where we were. I didn't speak the whole way, and I could feel Jonathan's gaze on me several times. After a while, he finally spoke, telling me to go back with him. "If you're really worried, your parents can come back with us too." This time, I finally couldn't hold back anymore and didn't want to restrain myself. I sneered and looked directly into Jonathan's eyes for the first time. After a few months of not seeing each other, Jonathan's memory really is getting worse. "You should understand who caused our family situation, right? Are you asking me to go back and take care of your little lover? Sorry, if she insists on eating my cooking, I really would make it so you both wouldn't come back. Our family has nothing left to lose, so we're not afraid." Jonathan seemed surprised that I would say something so harsh. He looked at me several times, as if he was thinking about something, but didn't pay much attention. "Your anger shows that you care about me. Sophia is still quite naive, I've already reminded her. Besides, you're pregnant." At this point, he finally looked at my belly but noticed that it was flat. "How many months along are you?" Why can't you tell yet? I really couldn't help but laugh this time. By the way, when I was early in my pregnancy, it coincided with the time Jonathan and Sophia were getting along well. He probably only heard me mention it casually and didn't take it seriously, so he has no idea how far along I am. If it weren't for these matters, I should be 7 months along by now. Jonathan, you're absolutely right. You mentioned that the personalities of the Jonathan family members are a bit strange. I'll remember that. To avoid becoming a madman like you, I smiled at him happily and have already freed myself from this influence. Jonathan's eyes were full of anger. Jonathan kicked me out of the car. Seeing his final expression of disbelief, I found it quite amusing. Things have come to this point, yet he still pretends there is a deep familial bond. Or perhaps he knows how genuine my love for him is, but his nature is twisted, always doing things that go against his conscience. He might think that even if he hurts me deeply, it wouldn't really lead him to harm me and our child. Now I gave him a completely different answer. Perhaps at this moment, he is thinking of some dark things again. It doesn't matter. Jonathan kept his distance from me. I walked for almost half an hour before seeing a taxi. To save some money, I walked for a long time and finally saw a bus. With the end of the kitchen shift approaching, if I leave quietly like this, I'll probably be fired tomorrow. I sighed. Jonathan specifically came out this time to pick someone up. He knew the news right away, but he was too entangled with Sophia to handle it. On the night Emily left, he came out of his room in his pajamas and saw the wedding ring glinting on the trash can. He picked up the ring, his expression neutral, and examined it closely. This ring was specially made by a top designer, costing nearly twice what Emily's father's company was worth. He deliberately told Emily this news. He thought she would jump for joy, but instead, Emily immediately hid in his arms, visibly startled. Jonathan couldn't help but chuckle, but soon his smile faded. It seemed he really wasn't doing well. Emily's love felt truly beautiful, making him feel like he was dreaming every day. However, he couldn't help but want to dig deeper, wanting to know more, until he received the frightening answer. This time, Emily probably wouldn't forgive him easily. Jonathan stood in front of the hotel floor-to-ceiling window, thinking that it was okay. If Emily was angry, it meant she still cared about him. Emily was a very obedient child. When the time came, he just needed to pamper her a little more. Just then, Sophia returned, carrying luxury shopping bags that had rubbed her wrist raw. She circled around Jonathan twice, then jumped into his arms and kissed his cheek. "Honey, come and see my new bag. I waited a long time to buy this." Sophia happily handed the bag to Jonathan. Excessive money can easily reveal one's true thoughts. Sophia seemed to lose a bit of her true self in the process. Emily rarely buys these things, only reluctantly using his card when she has to support him. Jonathan felt a bit confused at the time and thought Emily was being a bit pretentious. Why put on such a show when he is so wealthy? At times like this, Emily always says, "Honey, my living conditions are already better than many people's, and I don't really pursue material enjoyment. If there's extra money, wouldn't it be better to do some charity?" She seriously told him that comparing oneself to others is like poison, utterly meaningless. When our child is born, we can set a good example for them. Jonathan felt a stirring in his heart. His love for Emily grew stronger, displaying more destructive desires. Finally, upon seeing a radiant Sophia, he took action. He wants to know if all women are like this. The result left him very disappointed. Jonathan walked up to Sophia, about to say something, when he suddenly noticed she was wearing a ring. It was the wedding ring he had kept before. "Where did you find this? Have you touched my things?" Sophia was startled by Jonathan. She pressed her lips together and quietly responded, "This ring isn't for me. Who else could it be for?" "Honey, you wouldn't be that petty, would you?" Jonathan couldn't help but laugh. He suddenly felt that all of this was meaningless. Jonathan ignored Sophia's pain and broke his thumb that was wearing the ring. Then, he carefully put the ring away. "What gives you the right to wear my wife's things?" That night, Sophia was thrown out of the hotel by Jonathan. "My parents found out I was working in the kitchen, my hands were full of injuries, and I lost my job," they cried out of pain. "Emily, Dad, and Uncle Anderson partnered on a project, and soon our family will have money. You should stay home. Dad is here. Why suffer outside?" Mom also chimed in, insisting on pushing me back to my room and tucking me into bed. "Rest well, your dad and I are here." Mom gently stroked my hair, saying as long as we're around, We'll always support you. My daughter is destined to live a good life." I felt a bit uncomfortable and couldn't help but burrow under the covers. At night, the dim light shone in my eyes. I groggily opened my eyes and saw Mom shining a flashlight, gently wiping my fingers while holding some disinfectant. She was wearing reading glasses, carefully blowing on it and applying a thick layer of ointment. I felt particularly touched and didn't say anything about it. I slept especially well that night. Ever since Jonathan came over last time, I felt he wouldn't give up easily. That day, I had just returned home, and to my surprise, Jonathan was casually sitting on my sofa. My dad looked unwell, his head tilted to one side. I quickly walked over and positioned myself to protect my parents. "What are you doing here?" Jonathan stood up, relaxed his brows, and revealed a sincere smile. "I want to discuss with my parents about taking you home with us. I was wrong at that time and hurt my parents' feelings. I have already arranged a solution. As long as Dad comes home, the company's situation will return to how it was before." I stared coldly at Jonathan. "Do you think we are just playthings that you can treat however you want? When you're happy, you give some benefits, but when you're not, you throw a tantrum? Jonathan, I have clearly told you that there is indeed something wrong with your state, and you are not suitable for pursuing love at all. Please leave my house now." Jonathan has never been spoken to like this, but now he regrets it and doesn't want to play those testing tricks anymore. He just wants to go back to the old days with the person in front of him. Jonathan looked at my father and knelt down without hesitation. "Dad, I didn't understand before and made you sad. Can you give me another chance?" "Wife," Jonathan tried to hold my hand, but I shook his hand off. Seeing him kneel down to apologize to my dad brought me some satisfaction, but I would never forgive him. "Jonathan, I beg you not to entangle with our family anymore." I expressed my attitude firmly. Jonathan found that communication was ineffective, so he left that day. Unexpectedly, every day that followed, Jonathan would actively seek me out. With no one at home to talk to him, he found things to do by himself. When our family had meals, Jonathan would also sit at the table. He seems to be naturally thick-skinned, willing to do anything to achieve his goals. I called the police, and Jonathan actually took out his marriage certificate. Our whole family felt a headache and couldn't think of any other solutions. One day, a week later, I received a call from the hospital. Jonathan had been stabbed several times and was now fighting for his life in the hospital. I was a bit confused, thinking this was yet another trick of Jonathan's. Since I had nothing to do, I decided to go to the hospital to take a look. Outside the emergency room, there was a bodyguard covered in blood and a woman. She was Jonathan's biological mother, whom I had only met once at the wedding. A few years ago, she officially separated from Jonathan's father, and now she happened to be in this country. I once heard Jonathan say that when he was a child, his mother often did some inappropriate things in front of him. She also told him that for families like theirs, as long as they lived well, they didn't need to care too much about ethics and morals. I glanced at him and didn't say a word. Jonathan's mother didn't mind, made a phone call, and soon someone brought a woman to the hospital. That person was Sophia. Her clothes were tattered and her hair was messy. She had lost one high heel and there were visible marks on her thighs. The situation didn't look good. The safety abroad is not as good as at home. Sophia was kicked out by Jonathan. She was wearing all designer brands and was completely unfamiliar with the area, making her easily susceptible to danger. Sophia saw me. She was very agitated and wanted to confront me, but was firmly held back by someone behind her. As she got closer, I smelled a strong odor of urine. Sophia was dressed casually, she couldn't stand properly, and started accusing me while sitting on the ground. "You shameless woman, why are you here?" Suddenly, it seemed like she understood. No wonder Jonathan brought me here and lied to me saying it was a vacation. We all ignored her, and Sophia began to laugh loudly. Her state was a bit strange. She rambled incoherently, pointing at me and Jonathan, cursing loudly, accusing Jonathan of being heartless, saying that after breaking her fingers, he didn't even offer her any compensation and wanted to end it like that. She was very angry, thinking that Jonathan was just venting at her. After all, he used to like her so much. After bandaging her finger, she went to the bar to drink with peace of mind. A few foreigners surrounded her, and something was slipped into her drink. She quickly lost consciousness. After that, she went through very painful days. She was treated carelessly, and many people had touched her. Her life was greatly affected. If Jonathan doesn't like her, then why is he still bothering her? Sophia's smile carried a hint of sadness. After escaping, she bought a knife and stabbed Jonathan fiercely. The bodyguard whispered to Jonathan's mother about what to do, and Jonathan's mother murmured a few words, then Sophia was dragged away. I watched the scene and couldn't help but feel emotional. A bad tree won't bear good fruit. Compared to other members of the Jonathan family, Jonathan's current performance is indeed lacking. Before long, the lights in the emergency room went out. Jonathan was wheeled out, attached to a respirator, and sent to the intensive care unit. The doctor carefully greeted Jonathan's mother and informed her about Jonathan's current condition. One stab hit the spine. The wound isn't very deep, but it still affected the nerves. Whether he can stand again in the future remains to be seen. Another stab injured Jonathan's lower body, and he might not be able to have children in the future. After hearing all this, I felt a bit chaotic inside. Is it fate? Or is there a cause for every effect? A few days later, I heard that Jonathan had woken up. He accepted the possibility of his paralysis quite well, even making some self-deprecating jokes and laughing happily. He wanted to see me. After my parents persuaded me, I decided to come. Jonathan's room was particularly bright. His mother spent a lot of money on a caregiver, determined not to let him easily give up on life. I stood by Jonathan's bedside, and he never looked in my direction. He slowly began to share his journey with me. In the end, he asked me if I would still choose to be with him if I had known earlier that he had psychological issues. I thought for a moment and finally said I couldn't do it. I'm just an ordinary person. I can't save others. In fact, if a person wants to change, they ultimately have to rely on themselves. Jonathan smiled as he shed tears. He solemnly apologized to me and also expressed regret for the child who would never see this world. I don't know if Jonathan will regret it, but I suddenly felt much more at ease. The problem that had been bothering me for so long was finally resolved. Jonathan finally agreed to divorce, and he had his lawyer prepare the agreement, voluntarily giving me 2/3 of his assets. This matter attracted the attention of many elders in Jonathan's family. When Jonathan was in trouble, no one cared. But once it involved their own interests, everyone immediately came out to intervene. Jonathan dealt with those people in a very tough manner. Although he is now physically limited, as long as he has breath in him, he won't let anyone speak ill of his affairs. I accepted this money with a sense of peace in my heart. I left most of the money for my parents, and seeing them gradually stand taller really made me feel good. When they heard about Jonathan's situation, they were all quite emotional, but then reminded me to definitely check if the other party's parents are reliable next time I look for a son-in-law. For example, Uncle Anderson's son is quite good. He's almost 30, unmarried, and very capable. I just smiled and said nothing, arranging everything myself and bidding farewell to my parents. The marriage over the past few years has made me feel trapped in a closed space. Now, I want to see the outside world. I heard that Jonathan later returned to his country. His family is still holding out hope, trying to find ways to send people to his side to gain some benefits from him. Jonathan is now like a beast freed from its restraints, hurting others as he pleases, making it unbearable for those who take care of him. I no longer focus on other matters. Following the guidance of my soul, I went to the dreamlike Arctic, witnessing the vast ice fields and beautiful auroras. The cold air makes me feel refreshed. Reindeer and Arctic foxes peek out. I wave at them, quickly taking photos to eternally preserve these interesting moments. I sit on a cruise ship heading south, happily chatting with many strangers. We talked about various topics, sharing many life experiences, and we couldn't help but enjoy ourselves. I posted a lot on my social media, and each post received a like from Jonathan. He never talks much, like a little mouse quietly watching over my happiness, afraid I might find it annoying. I traveled for a long time, and my last stop was the White Cliffs of Dover in England. I walked up to the top of the hill along the green grass, spread my arms, and enjoyed the gentle breeze. Suddenly, I heard a click. Someone took a photo of me. I turned around and found a very handsome man standing behind me. He had gentle blue eyes, a high nose bridge, and looked like a typical foreign gentleman. To my surprise, he spoke in a familiar language. "Hello, I saw your beautiful figure. May I take a picture of you?" He shook the camera in his hand and said with a smile that he was on a business trip to this country and suddenly thought to come and take a look during his free time. I smiled and shook my head. We sat down together for a cup of coffee, and he began to introduce himself to me. "Although I'm not sure why, seeing you makes me feel very comfortable. My name is Anderson, and you?" I smiled faintly. "Emily, I'm very glad to meet you."